All right. Morning, morning. So this morning we're talking about the common, the common man, or woman. I don't know about that. Just an amorphous mass of mediocrity. What makes you different from the bunch, and what makes you the same? So, do you stand out? Can you stand out? Do you want to stand out? And if you do, what makes you stand out? So, but then, yeah, what makes us all the same, I suppose, is death and taxes. You know, it's happens to everybody, unfortunately. But hopefully, that's not only the common things. Some of the other things are perhaps good. So, Lee, ah, you're not one of the commoners, are you?
It's an interesting question that you should be asking that, Ivan. You got my head going, though, when you said death and taxes, because I've just read an article that spoke about in America, they've now have socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor. And I just thought that was an interesting thing, that the rich are paying fewer taxes. The very, very poor don't pay taxes. And then it's this middle group and mainly the lower middle incomes that are paying the most tax. So yeah, so who pays taxes? That will be a whole interesting discussion. Sorry, you just took me down a rabbit hole down there. This question of what is unique about us, I don't know if if we want to be unique to stand out, but I think we want to be unique in the sense that we feel special, we feel that there is something that makes us us, and not just part of. I think it's in corporates. They'll often say to me, "I don't want to just be a number." You want to be known, you want to be identified as a real person, and that you are you. And that's why people's names are so important, because it identifies and acknowledges that person. So I think we do want to be unique, whether you want to stand out or not. Well, I think that might be a different thing. But I think that uniqueness, it pulls against also our need to belong, and to feel like I'm part of something, I'm not on my own. And I think it's part of if I'm just philosophical for a second, that I think that's part of the tension that we live with as human beings, is that we want to be different, we want to stand out, we want to be unique, but at the same time, we don't want to feel isolated and alone and separate from our group or our tribe. We want to feel like there's a sense of belonging. But where my thinking started around this topic was actually a movie, and I might have mentioned before, because has such a vivid impact on me. And I know it's based on a book which I couldn't ever really get into, so I just loved the movie, called Snow Falling on Cedars. I don't know if anybody saw it. It's quite a long time ago. And it was a set in the just after the Second World War in San Francisco, or along that coast, that west coast, and it's the murder trial of a Japanese man. And of course, along the west coast, there were Japanese detention camps. And he had come from one of these detention camps. Snow falling on cedars, Edward. Cedars, the trees. And it's the story really of the Japanese culture in conflict, or American culture in conflict with the Japanese culture. And here's this Japanese man who has been taught this absolute control, that your dignity, that your this utter holding everything together in yourself was the highest value. And so he sits in this courtroom accused of a murder, that he has not committed. And he is absolutely, or at least he says that he's innocent the whole time, but he never shows any emotion. And at one point in time, the prosecutor shouts at him, you have to be guilty because you're not showing any emotion. And it's this, so that for me was just a prime example of how we assess or evaluate others on our own sense of what others should be like, and that there's this uniqueness around our culture and our thinking. But when the movie now starts to show you who this Japanese man really is and his feelings for his family and what he's actually experiencing, the extreme anxiety that he's feeling through this court case. And it's not a case of him not feeling, it's the expression of it that's been changed in his culture. So I thought that was such a fascinating study on our humanity and how our emotions and our feelings have so much in common, and yet the expression can be so different. And then the last thing I wanted to say in terms of, so I had to think about, so what makes me unique? What could I say is unique about me? And the simplest thing that I could think of is my story. No one has my story. There may be many, many similarities with my story. Yeah, Ivan and I grew up in the same village. So there's cross paths, but there's the other things that have happened, and our families and experiences. And so these things have all changed so that my story ends up being utterly unique to who I am. So that's me. What's unique, what's common? How do you see that playing out in the world, in human beings?
Great, thanks, Lisa. So let's get across to one of the non-complaining commoners from the Commonwealth and see what he has to say on the subject. So Ed, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was intrigued by the sort of title in the email that Lee sent out, because it says, what is unique about us and what is common to the rest of humanity? As though we had nothing in common with the rest of humanity, and the rest of humanity had loads in common with each other. I'm just hoping that Lee gets over her existential crisis and we can get back to discussing things like the essential elements of a growth mindset. But I approached this subject from looking at what do we have in common? And I went right back to the basics. And I think the first thing we have in common is that we all need air, or we need oxygen to breathe, to live. Without oxygen, none of us can survive. That's the first thing we have in common. The second thing we have in common is we all need water to survive. And this is where the differences start to emerge, because there's a dichotomy. Some people have clean water to drink, and some people don't have access to clean water. And then I thought, well, the next thing we need is food. And here, the differences are much greater. For example, I'm a vegan. Most South Africans are meat eaters. And in between, we got vegetarians, flexitarians, pescatarians, fruitarians, all sorts of nonsense like that. And within those categories, we've got people with different tastes, different food cultures, people that like sprouts, people that hate sprouts, all sorts. And then even if we go back to thinking about water and the need to drink, some people will drink water, some will have juice, some will have tea. I'm a bit strange being an Englishman that doesn't like tea. I actually like rooibos tea, and most of my friends that I give it to don't like it. And then, other people will drink juice. And then when it comes to refreshments, some of us like Castle Lager, other like black label. Some people, my daughter, for example, likes Windhoek, and my friend Annie, she's much more a Savannah cider person. So we've got these branches. And if you do a quick bit of maths, if you've got 5 sort of branches off each time, by the time you've got to the 5th characteristic, you've got over 1,000 different combinations. And just for Trevor, who I know can't count past 3, that's exactly the same as writing down 1 every day for 3 years. Sorry, actually, that's with 4 differences. With 5 differences, it doubles. So by the time you get to, say, thinking about, your food choice, your language, we all communicate, but we all use a different language. And even when we use the same language, we've got different accents, different dialects, and even languages that are the same are different. Think about American and English, or Spanish spoken in Mexico and Spanish spoken in Spain. If I'm in Mexico and it's a warm day and I say tengo calor, it means I'm hot. If it's, say, in Spain, it means I'm feeling sexy. So, if you just take those few, language, food, water, job, hair color, you're talking about millions and millions of differences. So that's why we're all unique. But I think we've also got some common traits. And Lee mentioned that she found it extraordinary that people from Norway were normal in that they had families. So that's a common bond between a lot of people, that we've all got families. But even there's differences. I mentioned before I volunteer with a children's charity, and there we pick up the pieces of children that come from families where their parents don't like them. We all like our kids, but and we'll probably die for our kids, but other people don't. So even though we have common themes, not everyone those themes apply to. But it's interesting. I met a guy once who cycled from Dubai to Hull in the northeast of England. So he passed through lots of different countries, including Iran and Iraq. And in every single one, he said it was just people and their families trying to survive or trying to flourish. So I think that there's commonality, but it's not surprising there are differences, because you add those little differences up and they all become a massive number. I couldn't actually work the number out because there are so many different combinations. But that's my input. And I hope you get better soon, Lee.
All right, thanks, Ed. Yeah, it's it is interesting. You talk about we all need water. I have an uncle who stoutly refuses to drink water because he says, what fish do in water, don't you? So he sticks to his beer and wine. So anyway, so Trevor, are you common or are you unique?
No, well, it's quite clear to me that Ed doesn't know who he is. So, I'm just going to have to summarize for those listening for the first time. He's actually a South African, clearly spying in the UK. I mean, anyone who admits to Rooibos Castle and the Karoo as being some of his first loves identifies who the guy really is. So good on you, brother. Right, so where do the commonalities come in? I think Maslow, for me, took care of a lot of the commonalities. When you talk about almost the basic human needs, all the way through to what I believe most people are looking for, and that's some measure of self-actualization. So I think talking about commonalities and how we look, and by how we look, I mean, some are not as pretty and attractive and handsome as others, Ed. You know, hopefully we've got arms, we've got legs, we sort of look like human beings. But I think the differences come down to priorities. Each of us is at very different stages of our lives, and our priorities are extremely unique and different. And it's, for me, I think where society and people butt heads is in the timing of their particular priorities and what they value most at that particular time in their life for themselves or for their families. So, and sometimes these priorities don't happen to merge. You know, maybe people think differently. For instance, I believe we should be on this planet to add positive value to society. I absolutely dislike individuals who take away from society, or I wonder if this is an accounting terminology, so Ed can correct me, who add negative value to society. In other words, they take away from it. And from that, I believe it. There are individuals out there who've made it their mission to actually go and steal from others, to go and take away, to actually break down society as best as they possibly can. And that doesn't fit with me. So I don't have any commonality with that type of individual. I see someone has said negative growth. Yeah, all of that. So where was Lee going with this? Commonalities versus differences. Is that where it is? I think the psychologists and psychiatrists, their background is to work on what is it that makes these people to behave differently and not like the sheep they perhaps want us to be. All strength to the black sheep in society. The Englishman who drinks rooibos, has a castle, and tries to run through the Karoo. Those are the guys that I really admire. People who take their uniqueness and they make incredible things happen that other people don't. So hopefully I'm somewhere along the line, I was going down the route of your topic this morning, Lee.
Yeah, I think you almost got there, Trevor. I think you got to two and a half, but you didn't quite get to 3. So we wanted to find out what makes you unique. So not what makes Ed unique. We all know what makes Ed unique. So anyway,
I think Ed's criticism of me is what makes me unique. So whatever he says about me, I say I love it. Ed, go for it.
Yeah, it is interesting, you know. And I suppose in some ways, you know, we've covered the bases, but like I said earlier at the start of the session, you know, the amorphous mass of mediocrity, and unfortunately, I think there are many people in society that you know, Trevor said black sheep, and I wondered which direction he was heading there for a moment, but then I realized he meant the ones that stand out from the crowd, but not necessarily the color, which of course is a sensitive topic these days, but you know, you can get tied up in all sorts of funny semantics. And I mean, Ed spoke about, you know, the differences in language. And I mean, there's a couple of other comments that have been made about language. I mean, one of my favorites between American English and English is you know, the phrase, you know, let's table it. You know, if you say that in the English and South African society, you want to table something, means you want to put it in front of everybody for discussion. If you say that in America, it means that you're taking it off the table and you're putting it somewhere else. So I don't know how that works. So yeah, I always remember the story of these high-level negotiations that almost got into a boxing match because the English guys kept on saying, we want to table this, and then the Americans no, you can't table it. You can't table it, because they thought they were taking it off the table. So that was, how that works. I'm not too sure. When eventually someone realized they were both saying the same thing, they managed to get on with the discussions. But it is interesting how Americans talk about pavements, and those are the things you drive on with your car. Whereas in the real English world, pavement's the thing on the side of the road where you drive. So I don't know. It can all get very confusing. Yeah. So you say safety in numbers. Yeah, not if you're in the abattoir. Yeah, well, that's I think most of the amorphous mass of mediocrity is probably heading straight for the gates of the abattoir if they're not careful. A bit like the lemmings going over the cliff. So what makes us unique? I think what makes us unique is thinking. We challenge each other's thinking. We hopefully we are thinking people, and the way we think is perhaps slightly unique. But I suppose then there's a group of us that makes us common again. So I don't know. So it's all very difficult to separate what's common and what's unique between all of us, because as soon as you touch on something that we do together, it must become common, surely. But if you're doing it differently from others, then you must be unique. So yeah, it becomes a very convoluted path we weave here. So Lee, I think I've probably rambled enough on that topic as well. So back to you.
It did strike a thought, though. I did some research for one of the projects I was working on, talking about deal making across cultures. And with the increase of globalism and multinationals, the need to negotiate and sell in cultures that are very different to yours. And so there've been this huge investment in learning about the other person's culture and so on. And so it's got to the point where they said, actually, one of the most difficult things about deal making in the global environment at the moment, well, certainly that was pre-COVID, is that it wasn't that you didn't understand the other person's culture, is that you were overcompensating to take the other person's culture into consideration, and they were doing the same for you, and you were actually now tripping each other up completely. So where do we go from here? I can't, I'm now lost in my own existential amorphous mass of nothing. And even my thinking is not clear around where we go from here. So I am throwing it out to the group for some unique input to say, what do we talk about tomorrow?
If we're all unique, we won't reach a consensus on what to talk about. We need a leader.
But
all right. Okay. Here I am. Someone called? What? What? Listen, something that I just want to throw in. I don't know if we've had the discussion. I've been doing so much thinking on this topic. Just wondering, what is it that we learned from 2020 that we apply in 2021? And I'm thinking about all the common feedback seems to be that this world is in turmoil as a result of COVID-19, and the fact that someone like Ed can drink castle in the UK when we can't even get a castle here in South Africa. So we're still banned from getting any alcohol in. Not that I imbibe at all, Ed, just in case people are misled. But this a world of insecurity. The next decade is going to be, I'm listening to all the economists, we're going to see the collapse of the dollar and currencies here, and there are going to be different forms of currencies. Some are going to fly as a result of the insecurity of governments. And how does that make us as individuals, the unique individual that we are, feel about 2021 and the decade ahead? You know, what is our unique thinking telling us are the 1, 2, 3? I talked of priorities. We all have different priorities. What are the most important priorities for us as unique individuals to actually deal with 2021 and the coming decade of the 2020s?
Well, I think let's leave it at that. What are our priorities for 2021 and the rest of the 20s? The roaring 20s. Let's see how roaring they are. Roaring or whimpering. So yeah, what are our priorities? I think that's a great question for tomorrow. Thank you. You wanted to add, Trevor?
No, I was just thinking, suddenly I had a movie title flash past my mind, The Great Gatsby or something like that. I think I'm going to come up with a movie to fit the times. But maybe it's a remake of something I might have seen many years ago in a previous depression.
Just so you feel sorry for me, Trevor, because of lockdown, I can't get any Castle Lager because there's no South African shop that sells Castle in Cornwall, and I'm not allowed to travel out of Cornwall.
I am so happy, Ed. There's no way that you can be happy on the other end of the world, and we sitting here locked out from our favorite, I was going to say tea room, but
All right.
So we've got that in common, a shared agony.
oh, okay. We've finally got something in common here.
All right. So on that painful note, I think we'll end off for the morning. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day further and work out your priorities for tomorrow. Go well. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.